My name is Mary Beth Hunter, and I coach tennis in Marshall County. I ran the summer program for approximately 33 years. I coached the girls' tennis team for 20 years, and I coached the boys' tennis team for 14 years. I grew up in South Bend, and when I grew up, girls really weren't athletes. They didn't have sports in high school. We lived by Studebaker Park, and at that time you could just go down to the park and you picked up whatever was in the box and you just played. And they had tennis rackets and tennis balls, and I just loved it, and I just started practicing. They didn't really have like a summer program where you had lessons. You kind of just taught yourself back then, and they didn't have a girls' tennis team at the high school, so I always practiced with the boys' team. And then one day I was just at Leaper Park playing with some kids, and they didn't have any courts at night, obviously, with lights, so my parents would take me over to Potawatomi Park where there were 4 courts with lights and drop me off, and I just played with whoever was there, and then they'd come back and get me. But then one day I was playing at Leaper Park, and one of the coaches there saw me and said, "Would you like to play a tournament and represent South Bend?" And that's how kind of it started. At the time, you were just excited because we had no clue what it was all about, and then you started playing tournaments. And then I was really blessed to have Peru, Indiana, their tennis coach. He would just take kids and he would just pick them up in their bus and take them to tournaments every weekend. And I spent a lot of time in Peru in the summertime in their classes and practicing with their teams and staying at a girls' house. And I was just lucky that, it just happened, That's what I think that's what God wanted me to do, And then when I moved to Plymouth and we got married and started having children, you're just at the park, and they started having a program there, and it was on the front 4 courts. We didn't have the back courts then. And the 4 courts in the front were cement courts, and they had the wire fences. And the program had started the summer before, and so I talked to Jack Greenlee on the park board, and I said, well, I would be willing to do that. You feel like someone helped you, so you're paying back that person. And it just worked out that I only had to work 9 to 12, and I had 2 kids at that time. And then when the new court started in the back in 1973, the program just exploded. My husband was away at school one summer, and we were still on the front 4 courts. In fact, the boys' tennis team, that's where they played in those years. But we actually got those courts resurfaced, and I took pictures and sent them to them, and everybody was just so excited. We actually had real nets and real courts, not cement courts. And that was probably 1971 or about in there. No, I could not. They didn't have girls' teams. The only thing we had at Riley, we had a volleyball team, and then you just played the other South Bend schools. That's all you did. But I just practiced with the boys during their season, and then during the summer, I just went to tournaments every weekend. I mean, we had girls in our summer program all the time, and it just happened, that we started the program in the back, and I mean, we grew from 100 people in the program to one summer we had close to 500, and it was overwhelming. But it was just, one day Mr. Nixon came up to me, because he was the athletic director then, and said, Carol's Pettibone at that time was coaching the girls, and he said she thinks you should take her job. So it just kind of, everything just kind of fell into place. I always encourage my female players that were really good, you need to play with the boys. They just, not the boys are better, but they hit the ball harder, and I always told my girls team, I want you to play like boys. I don't want you to play like weenie girls. I want you to play strong and be positive, and and you get that playing singles and doubles, and you get that with playing with the guys too. And if you're really a good player, you're not going to hurt the boys players. There was no college. My parents, at that time, girls didn't go to college and play sports, and there was just no money in our family to do that. So, you just get a job out of high school. And honestly, I didn't play for a couple years because I was working and just growing up. You're not really grown up when you're 18, I guess. So then when I moved down here and eventually met my husband and got married and just saw the courts and the summer program, it just all fell into place. And then I started playing again and teaching. And then I got lucky enough to coach at Plymouth, so that was a blessing. Well, the girls' team had never had a winning season. And when you go back to those years, because it was 1980, I still remember, I don't remember any of my records or anything. That just wasn't important to me. But that first year, I remember we were 8-5. And they were just so excited. But it was fun, And those girls went 8-5, and then the program just started building, And when I first started coaching, you played 5 singles and 2 doubles. Well, now it's 3 and 2. And in fact, I told Michael Delp that. I said, you don't know this, because we were talking about doing this. And he said, you had 5 singles and 2 doubles, And then you go to your first sectional. At that time, it was probably 82 or 83. And 16 teams went to Peru, Indiana, and you only took your 1 singles player and your 1 doubles team. That's it. That was it. Yeah. Then a couple years later, you still went 5 and 2, but they changed the sectional to be like the boys, and you still took 3. You went 3 and 2 at your sectional. But the sad part about that is 2 of your players that played for you all year weren't going to get to play sectional, because you had to have 3 singles and 2 doubles.
That must have been tough.
Yeah, and then a couple years later it changed. Yeah. So, well, and to be honest with you, the summer program helped that, because those kids had lessons and they honestly knew what they were doing, So it helped a little bit that they had been through, not all of them, but a lot of them had been through the summer program, so they were at least knew how to serve and, that kind of stuff. Correct. Yeah. I did. I was really blessed with, you had players that tennis was their first sport, but you also had players that, like basketball or volleyball were their favorite sports, but yet when you had them in the summer, they practiced a lot, but when you had them during the season, they gave you everything that they had. I was really blessed. I had players that let me push them. And that's just my coaching style. I like to push kids to me, and they're not going to go to college and probably get a college scholarship or turn pro or anything, but just make them the best that they can be and make them the best person that they can be, We always set goals every year, where do you want to be at the end of the season as a player, as a person? Where do you see the team going? And I think that helps you later on in life to, set your goals and just to work hard at things. Things don't come easy sometimes, and you learn that on the court or you learn that in the classroom. It's not always easy to be successful. We just practice harder, and that's one thing that sometimes we would beat teams we probably shouldn't have beat, but because we worked harder during the season, we conditioned a lot. Let's say if they had a bad match or they had a lot of double faults, they'd have to run line drills, and it wasn't a punishment, it was just, you need to focus, And I had one girl that one time she ran and she had lost a conference match that she shouldn't have lost, and then she comes back and wins the conference tournament, and she said, thanks, coach, for pushing me. She was so mad at me probably when she was doing all the running, but when you're successful and you see sometimes that but when you condition that hard and you get into the third set and maybe you're playing someone that's maybe a little bit better than you, but they haven't worked as hard as you have, you can usually beat that person because mentally you're focused. And if you get too tired that third set, mentally you're tired too. Yeah. And I think a lot of my players learn that. And I really don't, but you look back and you think, maybe I was just too hard on them. I wasn't mean because I loved my kids and they knew it, but you just pushed them because you wanted them to be successful because that's what they wanted. That's what they're there for, And I think that would help them in the classroom too, I think you mature as a person for sure. I think at first you want to win, but then you learn. I think you learn even as a person and just growing older as a person and maturity. Winning's not the most important thing in the world, and it's not. But when you're going through it, it is, you know. But you just want to be a better person. And I think all those kids and, you know, my family, we were a family out there, you know, and a lot of people would say, you just need to get a couch and put it in the office and stay here and just spend the night. We were just a big family out there. And, you know, you look back and all those memories and all those people, and, you know, a lot of them have passed away or they're not playing tennis anymore because they're older and just can't. But when I still go by the courts and I see some of the older people out there that I got to help, and even some of the kids, it's just a blessing just to go by those courts and see everybody out there. You know, I don't think that I did, because I had coached the girls for so much, you know, a few years before the boys, and I had all those boys in the summer program, so they knew what I expected. I didn't work them any different. I worked the girls just as hard as the boys. I coached the girls like I was coaching a boys team, because you can push boys harder than you can girls sometimes, and I don't mean that bad, but sometimes that's, you know, but your reputation follows you, so they know what to expect. If they're going to play tennis for you and come out for you, the other players have said, you know, Mrs. Hunter does this, or Mrs. Hunter's going to expect this. You're not going to have an easy practice, or she's not going to let you out early, or whatever, you know, whatever. So, and I think that does with any coach. If you keep coaching, the longer you coach, your players, always tell the players, younger players coming up, this is what you should expect, or, you know, this is what the program's about. Oh, I'm not saying I never had a parent that didn't agree with what I was doing, but especially in the summer tennis program, because you're so close. I mean, we had, you know, you took kids to tournaments, you had travel teams, and you live with those parents in the summertime. But once the season started, we weren't friends. And I don't mean that bad, but there was a line that, you know, I'm the coach, you're the parent, so, you know, and they may not have always agreed with me, and I'm sure a lot of them didn't. Not a lot, but a few anyways. But they knew to leave me alone, I guess. I don't know how else to say it. You know, the boys team that went to the Final Four, you know, they were one of my favorites, but I had a lot of talent, so, you know, that was just a blessing. But a lot of those kids, tennis was their first sport, so that helps a lot, you know. And we had teams that, I had a girls team. One time we were at LaPorte at regional, and we had match point to go to, no, I'm sorry, we were at the semi-state, and we had match point to go to the state finals, and we lost that point, and I still remember that. I still see the forehand volley that we missed, and it's, I don't know, you just think, and then you feel bad for the girls and the team, because that was their goal that year, because they knew they could get there, you know, but that's just the way it is. Yeah, you're just proud, you know, not for me, but for them. And, you know, we didn't, like I say, we had 3 sport athletes. We just didn't have tennis players. And the teams we played at the Final Four, those kids were tennis players, you know, and they played indoors all winter. Our kids didn't do that. So, I mean, you just knew they accomplished something, you know, and I think they felt that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's really impressive for them to get that far.
Right.
You know, I mean, right. Plymouth's a big school, but it's not an Indianapolis school, you know.
No, it's not like Carmel and North Central, yeah. Where they have, you know, they have nationally ranked players. You know, we're lucky if we have Northern Indiana ranked players or Western ranked players, you know, and I've only had a couple of those, so, you know, but that's okay. You know, and then the next year, Michael and his partner went back for the state final. So, you know, they were there and they felt comfortable, you know. Well, our male player was my son, Neil Hunter, and he went to Purdue and played for 2 years, and then he hurt his back and couldn't play. He still plays, but he couldn't play competitive. Michael Delp, of course. And Michael was one of those players that I still remember, I had a private lesson with him every Friday morning at 8 a.m. for 4 years. And he worked, you know, for his dad, and then basketball was his favorite. But boy, he was so competitive, and he gave you everything, you know, that he had. And Jason Garriott was another one. Him and Michael grew up together playing tennis, and Jason's probably was my second best player that I ever had, but he was on that Final Four team. And then Matt Langfeld and Matt Hunter, my youngest son, played number one doubles, and they got to the Final Four. And girls, the first year I had coached, I had Laura Widener, who was Yoder's, I don't know, okay, and she was one of the best players in the area. You know, she loved tennis. She played all the time, went to tournaments every weekend, but you know, she didn't get to go on because at that time girls didn't go to the state finals. You only went to the sectional and regional, and that was it. But you know, the rest of the girls teams, I remember being at Lafayette, Jeff. We were at a tournament, and Betsy G and it's not her name now, but she lives in Indianapolis, and Sarah Smith, Sarah Guild, and then Chris Peters, they were all on that team, and those are the girls that came back and got the, you know, courts resurfaced, and you know, but we were at Lafayette, and and they had sent us 3 different places because there were I don't know how many teams there, maybe 16 teams there, and I was at a different court, and I didn't have an assistant coach at that time, so the parents had to go with their daughters and kind of help coach a little bit. And I came back, and everyone was in the finals, everyone. And we were up on a hill, and a parent from another school came up and said, "Did you know that your team is ranked in the state?" And the girls didn't know it. So after they won the tournament, and I showed that to them in the paper, that probably was the most exciting moment for the girls team ever, because they were actually ranked in the top 20 in the state. They were so excited and so proud. You know, I guess I was just so pleased for them. I didn't even think of what I thought of what they had accomplished, but I guess I just didn't look at it like that. You know, I guess you just look like all the years and hard work that we've been putting in, and we're going to continue to put in. It's really helping the kids, you know, and that's what it's about. Yeah. You know, but again, I was really lucky. I had a great husband who helped a lot.
That's been
well, I was lucky. I had Al Flory as an assistant coach at that time, and then Sandy Geis was my girls assistant, and they also helped with the summer program. So the 3 adults were out there, and that helps a lot. But the girls team, I coached for 7 years just by myself. We didn't have assistants at that time. So I think that made me a better coach, because I was coaching varsity and JV, and so you had to know what the score was on all 9 courts or 8 courts, whatever you had, and you had to get to every court and coach, you know, every person. So that was an experience. But yeah, what we did is we had a doubles team go to the state finals before the Final Four team, and we took the whole team down there, and we actually, after their match was over and they were going to play the next day, we stayed and practiced on Indianapolis, on the North Central's courts. I wanted them to feel it, you know. I wanted them to, because the teams were still playing. We just went to the back courts because they had like 27 courts. We just went to the back courts, and we had to practice just so they could hear the crowd and all the excitement, because I thought we could be here someday. Well, then the next year we went, and they, you know, even though we didn't win, they still felt comfortable, and it was exciting to be there. Absolutely, absolutely. I always enjoyed coaching-wise picking out their opponent's weaknesses, and then you could teach your kids, you know, because sometimes when they're growing up like that, they can't, in high school, they don't, if someone's got a bad forehand or backhand, they can pick that out. But let's say if you drive the ball right at their hips or whatever, if you make them move a certain direction, they're going to miss the shot. And so I think that was one of my best attributes, was I could pick out their opponent's weaknesses, and then I could transfer that to them and help them win their matches that way. Yeah, right. Yeah. And I always had a notebook, and I would always make notes during the year, because we didn't scout like basketball coaches scout, you know, and that. But okay, this player has these weaknesses. So then at the end of the year, if you play them in the NLC tournament or you play them at sectional, you had those notes. So we would go over it before the match and say, now remember, this player can't move this direction, or, you know, her backhand's not the strongest. So, you know, and so the next year if that player came back, you still had those notes. so you could still go over that with your players. You can do it without a supportive spouse, and kids too, for that matter. But like I say, I grew up when you didn't really have coaches. What I would do, I would, once I started coaching, I always walked in the gym after school, and I would watch Mr. Nixon's baseball practices, and I would watch Jack Edison's basketball practices. And you'd be surprised, just walking around that gym and having your ears open, what you learn and what you hear. And I could take some of their advice that they were giving to their players and kind of put it through my head and say, hey, I can use that in tennis, So, and I read a lot, went to a lot of coaching clinics, but per se, the best person I could say was Joe Sane from Peru, who took us every weekend in his bus to tournaments. But he really wasn't a coach. He was just paying someone else back for helping him along the way and just taking kids to tournaments, So I guess I would have to say he was the influence. He worked out of town, but it's funny because when we would run the summer program, we had a team tennis on Wednesday nights, and we used the front and the back courts at that time because we had so many teams. And if it rained during the day, my 3 kids and my husband knew I better get out the tennis courts and help my mom squeegee the courts. So it was a family affair. It really was, But we were lucky. The kids played when they were little, but we always told them, if you get to high school and you don't like tennis, you do not have to play, and that's okay. Just the competitiveness. I've just been a competitor all my life. I think until I turned 60, I realized I can't do what I used to do. I just hated to lose. I don't know if that's the proper way to say it, but I'm just I was always a competitor, and I still have that inside me. I just physically can't do it anymore just because, I'm a lot older. Oh yeah. Right. The girls would always start the 1st of March, and I was really lucky. Mr. Nixon was the athletic director at that time, so he let me and Sandy have the girls. I always call it the girls' gym. It's still the girls' gym to me, but I know it's the auxiliary gym, but by ourselves. So we'd have 20-some girls, and we had 3 courts in there. We'd set up volleyball nets, and it kind of just drove me crazy to have all those girls in the gym at one time. So we would bring the JV in from 3:30 to 5 and bring the varsity in from 5 to 7, and it meant more hours for me and Sandy, obviously. But everybody was hitting a lot of balls then, and the girls weren't talking and visiting and talking about their day. They were actually working hard. When you have 20-some girls in a gym like that, they start, because they get bored too, So that's what we would do. So I was really lucky that we could practice like that. But we spent pretty much the whole month of March in the gym. Yeah. And there were our first match was usually the 1st of April, first part of April. And sometimes I didn't even have a lineup, and I had it in my head, but I didn't have a lineup because we hadn't been outside yet. So. Yes, Michael Delp took over the boys team, and then Brad Heck took over the girls team after I had a few girls coach the girls team for a couple years, and then marriage and kids, and so Brad's been coach of the girls. I really can't tell you how many years, but so the only time I go back out there to help them is if they call and say, Coach, can you come back out and just help with practice today? And I do that every once in a great while, not very often. And then the summer program, Michael's been doing that, but because he's the athletic director now, he's really cutting back time-wise. So my husband and I went out last year and taught 2 days a week. And then this year we'll probably maybe do the same thing, I can't put in 10 and 12 hours anymore, plus you really don't want to, but we'll go out and help a little bit this summer.
So what was it?
It really wasn't that hard because I knew I had left it in good hands. When you just know when it's your time. Our kids had moved away, they were getting married, they were having babies, and I was working in the athletic office, and then when I became the assistant AD, it was just like, okay, I can't do both, and so you had former players coaching the teams that you had coached, and I felt I left them with good teams, so then I felt, okay, this is a good time to leave. So it was okay.
Yeah.
You know. And my husband was really ready for me to leave. He really was. He was ready for me to spend time with him. You know, it's strange. I would go watch the matches, and you know, I didn't, unless one of the coaches would come up and say, "Coach, do you see something I don't see?" Or, you know, I never interfered, you know, because it's their team, it's not mine, you know, and you're so busy in the athletic office at that time that I really didn't have time to go out a lot, you know. I miss the competitive part. I miss being with the kids. I don't miss the bus rides. I don't miss the cold weather in the spring, you know, but I can go out to the matches and watch enough. And then we still have a grandchild that's playing on the boys team, and then next year will be, you know, I probably won't go as much because, you know, we'll be doing other things. So, oh my. It was, to me, it was just a blessing for my family, blessing for my husband. God's been so good to us that you just felt like this is what I was supposed to be doing, you know, and now I don't know if I want to be back out there teaching again, but I think God's, you know, opened another door to go back out, because you still have, even though you're older and you can't move like you used to, you still have a lot to offer, you know, and you just still love the kids, you know. So I guess that's the biggest thing is I just felt like it was a big blessing to us. I hope my family feels like that, but I think they do. Well, I think it builds the community, the closeness. I think the community can, you know, like I felt like the tennis people out there, we were just a big family, and you love each other. You know, if someone is having problems, the community, or you're, like, let's say the boys basketball team or whatever team, volleyball team, they can come together as a family and help each other out. You know, you go to the tournaments, or it just adds excitement to the community. I don't think it should be a priority, but it does become a priority when you're going through it. I just think it builds camaraderie in your community. You know, you go watch the pros, and in fact, we took kids to Indianapolis, and they got to watch the pros and walk around with them. And one time we took the high school kids down there and the junior high. My two assistant coaches took the junior high kids back, but the high school kids wanted to stay because Jimmy Connors was playing in the night. And so we stayed, we bought them tickets, and we got tickets in the second row right behind Jimmy Connors. And then he was walking down the walkway, and his son's birthday was that day, and he actually invited some Plymouth kids to go back in the tent and have birthday cake with his kids. And those kids are never going to forget that.